What should require a license but doesn't? The reply all button. Got a cousin that does this shit, breeds dogs until she can't and gets rid of them. She is such a piece of white trash. She's been called out on Facebook for it by other family, but I honestly believe she thinks she doing God's work by the way she responds. Finally took her off mine. I only keep close family and friends. I kept her added because her trashy adventures were entertaining in a train wreck way, but this shit is too much. Depending on where you are, you need a license to breed dogs, which is issued by the National Breeders Association after inspection, and you're required to follow their guidelines. Never buy a puppy from an unofficial breed like Golden Doodles because those don't have to follow the guidelines. I absolutely agree with you. You should need a license for all kinds of pet breeding. Ferrets are a good example. In many places you can't buy ferrets without signing a document that they are going to be castrated as soon as possible unless you have a breeder's license before purchasing the puppies. People always act like obligatory castration would mean doing it way too young, therefore compromising your pet's development health, but these agreements exist and should be used to regulate breeding. Ferrets are a good example. In many places you can't buy ferrets without signing a document that they are going to be castrated as soon as possible unless you have a breeder's license before purchasing the puppies. People always act like obligatory castration would mean doing it way too young, therefore compromising your pet's development health, but these agreements exist and should be used to regulate breeding. I'm surprised they even let you get away with such an agreement. Whenever my family have bought cats, always BSH, because what's not to love about fluffy blue teddy bear cats? The breeder has never allowed me to pick up until after they have been fixed. First time I rented a box truck, I had just ditzed from the army, got the truck and a trailer to tow my car 2,000 miles halfway across the country. First time with both such a large truck, and towing a trailer on public roads. Radio was trash, and when using the aux cable, there was a high-pitched noise coming from it. Pain. No clue how I survived with zero issues, but it was definitely an experience I won't forge. I was 19K, M1 Abrams crew member. I know a little bit about tanks. I haven't towed a tank in an M88, but I rode in a M88 towing a tank, as it plastered the entire front with oil, which we then had to spend hours scrubbing off LMAO. And don't get me started with railhead either. Got stuck being voluntold to work railhead at NTC. Aside from driving dozens of tanks off the train, and also towing a tank off the train with another tank, and being responsible for the ground jetting for the same thing. But I can see the heightened anxiety towing through a civilian village like that. My only fear was tipping over the tank. At least the bruises heal, but the hatred you'll get for destroying an 800-year-old building sounds much worse. For mine, to get a permit, assuming you already have a regular driver's license, I just had to pass like a 20-question test. Then I had to hold that for like 3-6 months. Then I could either choose to do an all-day class and exam, or I could take the driving test to get the endorsement. I took the driving test. It was more than a figure 8, but a series of different skills like turning, stopping, going around cones, etc., all at very low speeds, which makes it harder. Put a foot on the ground and you auto fail. It definitely wasn't the most extensive driving test, but you had to show you could control the bike. This is the most insane thing to me about the US. Europe has many levels of motorcycle licenses, so you can ride a 125cc at 16/17, and you can only ride more powerful bikes when you are older and have done more tests. You need to be 24 to get a full bike license if you haven't ridden before. I had a buddy from Alabama tell me you can get to fucking 1,300 BUSA at 14 in his state. That's just enabling kids to kill themselves. Driving a Class A RV and or towing a trailer. I'm a truck driver who drives 74-foot-long combination vehicles which require a Class A license, but people can drive a 45 RV with an 18 trailer behind them which could weigh 20-40 kLbs with only a Class C license and no training. There are some states that require it for RVs above 26 kLbs, but the majority do not. The whole driver's license process should be far more difficult than it is in America. When I tow my boat, I leave at least 10 vehicle lengths between me and the lead car. People don't realize that's my safety cushion and not a free spot for them to get in my lane and slam on the brakes to make an exit. Compared to your weight, I'm not pulling anything, but for an older truck pulling a 6,000-pound trailer, it's about at its maximum. On one occasion I had to hit my brakes hard enough to start sliding, check my mirrors and get off the brakes at the last few seconds to be able to steer again to change lanes. It's scary stuff knowing if you hit a person in front of you you're more than likely going to kill everyone in the cars. I appreciate what you do for a living, it can't be an easy life. RVs should require a CDL. Maybe even certain tow motorhomes after a certain length, too. So many people driving those things with no idea what they're doing. I'm sure it depends on jurisdiction, but where I am you need an air brake endorsement if it has air brakes. But it's not really that different than driving a truck. You can drive a 5-ton truck with a regular driver's license, and an air brake endorsement if it has air brakes, which not all of them do. RVs aren't really practically the same as a semi like the other commenter claimed, they're pretty much just empty boxes. You can thank AARP lobbying. The only thing one may need to get is an aircraft endorsement if the RV has air brakes. Beyond recreational vehicles, if you drive a vehicle that's 14K and 1 pounds you have to have a doc medical cert. If it's a straight truck, no trailer, and its GVWR is 26K and 1 pounds you must possess a Class B. If it's a combination vehicle with those same specs you must possess a Class A. Then it also breaks down further with restrictions, i.e. automatic, or pinla hook. That's why you can buy a school bus that you must have a CDL to drive and rate it under a recreational vehicle, and then you no longer need a CDL. Well, you can just as well legalize and regulate it and still focus on the trafficking and predatory aspects as they keep being criminalized. This is indeed how prostitution works in many European countries. Has the benefit of making it fully legal to provide the service. You'll pay proper taxes and have social security and insurance protection as well. And if someone really wants to use a prostitute, then sure, go ahead, just like going to get a haircut. Simply decriminalizing it might still make providing or using a service illegal. Sure, you won't go to jail, but paying an anonymous fine still sucks and takes unnecessary resources from law enforcement even with a hands-off approach. Cannabis is decriminalized in some countries and you only have the black market, no legal shops or anything. All the negatives with the only benefit of it not going on your record, no jail, low fines like speeding a little bit. Personally, I'd never go to a prostitute, but if I wanted I could completely legally. Instead of still keeping it a bit shady like weed, which is decriminalized but not legal, here in my country. Would be better for everyone to have it properly instead of an open secret half-legal kind of thing. I'm going to take some heat for this, but owning certain breeds of dogs. I'm not talking about pit bulls, or anyway I don't know much about them, the controversy around them. And I'm not talking about stigmatizing certain breeds of dogs, like keeping them out of apartment buildings, or airplanes. That's a different thing and I don't have a developed opinion on it. I'm talking about getting a license to own a husky, for example, or an Australian cattle dog, dogs that were bred for specific hard-working purposes, and become fashionable or look cool. And so people want one for the coolness factor without knowing much about the breed, or how to respect its needs. That results in a lot of sad, frustrated dogs with clueless or overwhelmed owners, which leads to lots of issues, especially in cities, but anywhere, really. Like frustrated working dogs tearing up apartments, biting other dogs, just generally being uncontrollable. Kind of like getting a boater's license or motorcycle license. I think certain breeds of working dogs should require the owner to take a class and receive a level of certification and license to own the breed. And if they don't want to, there are lots of other less powerful, more sociable breeds to choose from. That results in a lot of sad, frustrated dogs with clueless or overwhelmed owners, which leads to lots of issues, especially in cities, but anywhere, really. I dog watched for a bull terrier and that dog was insane. They said, once a night for an hour he goes crazy. Yeah, think? That dog needs to be on a farm running his ass off for 25 hours a day, not sitting in your city apartment doing nothing. I fostered an Australian Shepherd. I had to run 5 miles a day with that dog or she would go nuts. Exactly. It's not the dog's fault its needs are being met or understood. And then the owners have problems finding decent housing to live with them. Can find a place to exercise them properly because they didn't realize how much to exercise them, or they get in trouble and are forced to give them up, and now the dog has issues and no idea how to behave. It sucks. Edit, aren't being met. I got a rescue and was told Shepherd X Akita. They didn't mention wolf and absolutely zero socializing and zero training. Had never been in a house or around other animals except kittens and chihuahuas. Spent his whole 9 months on a chain in the yard, never walked, never on a leash. Found out after I had him a few weeks and was like, why, he insane? Oh, that's why. Okay. Now people are amazed at how well behaved he is, and he has free run of my shop and home, gets to go to the bush 3-4 times a week and run crazy for a few hours. Has a bed but usually sleeps at the front door and gets raw beef for dinner every night. This makes a lot of sense, and in my country, Spain, you need a license for what they call potentially dangerous dogs, which include pit bulls, American Staffords, Shiba Inus, Dobermans, Rotties and so on. This is cheap, but you need to be psychologically approved by a doctor plus approved by your city hall to adopt one of these dogs. No regulation on work dogs. Cattle dogs, for example, are kind of fashion now here, and German Shepherds, for example, which in my opinion, and I own 2 toy wiener dogs and an Amstaff, is nonsense. I stand with you, my guy. I completely agree with you 100% with the dogs. We have a husky. I always thought they were beautiful dogs, but I knew how much work and training we had to do to own one, so whenever my mom bought it up I would say no, don't get a husky, because I knew me and my siblings were gonna be the ones to train it and she wasn't gonna do a thing to help. She got one anyway from some shady owner. Pretty sure he wasn't ready to be away from his mother and litter yet, because he used to bite hard when he was a puppy. It's like he has this never-ending energy and playtime is all the time. So far hikes seem to tire him out, but it's also tiring me out, lol. I love him to bits and pieces, but oh my god is he tough to handle sometimes. Agree, and thank you for this post. I have a 501c3 nonprofit that rescues Australian cattle dogs, Aussies, border collies, etc., and the amount of ignorance toward this breed is shattering. I only adopt to experienced herding dog adopters to make sure my dogs live healthy, happy, active lives with people who stimulate them mentally and physically. It cannot be stressed enough. I had a visit to my home from law enforcement from a truly ignorant, obese female cop who would not wait for me to put up my cattle dog. He did what I have trained him to do. He circled and nipped her boot. She immediately pulled out her pistol and was chasing him for a good 3 minutes with me running interference for him so that she would shoot me instead. Ignorance is everywhere. Strongly second. I work with dogs daily and I really wish I could shake clueless dog owners silly. Yes, your husky has behavior issues and cries so loudly when crated in your 1-bedroom apartment for 8+ hours a day, so you get noise complaints, because that's not gonna cut it for a husky. Yes, your GSD is small dog reactive because you didn't socialize it properly or have control over it, so every small dog it sees it equates to prey. Yes, your heeler you bought BCU like the blue color is going to nip at your children's heels if you don't train it correctly and give it a job. Don't even get me started on the, thankfully, short trend of getting Malinois. There's a reason we in the industry call them alligators. I firmly believe if someone wants a working dog, they need mandatory training and to be able to prove they are going to give that dog a job. Even if it's a mundane job that isn't typical, like herding for heelers. There are breeds of dogs that require a job to put their energy and intelligence to work. Otherwise you get all the behavior problems we see people surrender their dogs for or want a full checkup for, because clearly something medically must be wrong because your energetic boxer ate the couch again. Most of the time I just wish people had gotten a lab or a golden. It's hard to fuck those up. Ada, adding breeds in the hound group. Most if not all should not be allowed in apartments or inner cities without access to large areas of land. We had a family who wanted their blue tick hound to bark because they said they got too many complaints about him baying at squirrels in their backyard while all of them were gone during the day. Similar are the people who get beagles, coonhounds, Rhodesian ridgebacks, etc. In Berlin as well. It's hell. The only people I see using them are drunks, teenagers and tourists with zero spatial awareness. Or some combination thereof. I've been almost run over on the sidewalk twice already. People leave them wherever, in the middle of the sidewalk, in front of shop doors or emergency exits. I've even seen a neat row of them fully charged lined up on the cycle path, so whoever charged them must have specifically placed them there like a complete idiot. I'm all for new mobility options, especially when it gets people to use cars less. But so far these scooters have only made things worse for pedestrians and cyclists. I want to draw a distinction between service animals and emotional support animals, ACEs. Service animals are highly trained and require proof of ailment to obtain, seeing eye dogs, grabber monkeys for people in wheelchairs, etc. These have legal protections and can essentially be anywhere where humans can be. ACEs are different in that they are protected from certain things. You don't have to pay a pet deposit for apartments. Sometimes you can bring them into certain medical appointments, etc. The distinction is that certain situations in certain places can restrict where an ACE can be. Currently, a lot of airlines won't allow ACEs to fly with their owners in the passenger bay. Service animals don't have those restrictions because they allow people to have greater functioning in situations where they would be at a disadvantage. This is often why you see service animals with bright vests or flags that show that they're working and shouldn't be petted. It actually can be very problematic to pet a service animal if it's in work mind. It sounds to me like you're talking more about ACEs, which I definitely agree with you in the fact that it's getting out of hand in terms of random people claiming their animals as an ACE without any real need to have one. In the US, states determine the rules who determining who can get ACEs, and some states are way more relaxed about it than others. I think those rules should be tightened down for both the sake of the owner and the animal. In the US, it depends on the state and the situation. In my state, businesses can ask for proof that the animal is an ACE, and failure to do so may result in being asked to leave. I don't know about all the states. If the letter contains diagnostic information for why they need an ACE, that can be protected under HIPAA, but the letters don't need to contain what the actual diagnosis is. It just needs to show that there is clinical need and an ACE would assist in treatment. I've never written a formal diagnosis in any letter that I've written, and they've all worked for clients so far. The only federal rule I know is that, if you have proper documentation, ACEs are always allowed at residences regardless of the owner's rules on pets, and no pet deposit can be taken. The only proof required is for your animal to be able to do a specific task to help you. But even then, in the US, you cannot ask what the medical condition is, you can only ask what they are trained to do. There is no official registry or anything like that. So a lot of people do claim their animals are service animals when they just want to get their dog eye where it's not supposed to be. This happened at a restaurant I worked at, and I saw several videos lately on our public freakout of this happening. But of course they don't want to put any barriers in the process of getting a service animal, so they are accessible for all disabled people. But without some form of authentication, it gets faked a lot. While I think that some people just shouldn't have children, enforcing this would likely be impossible, cause a lot of suffering for both children and their mothers, or lead to an Orwellian nightmare. Firstly, you don't need to buy kids, you only need a partner. That means the only way to monitor who gives birth, without all-around surveillance, is to monitor who goes to hospital to give birth. Given this, mothers who don't want the government to know that they got an unlicensed baby would just give birth in their own home without medical care or questionable, unlicensed medical care. This would increase the risk of the mother and her child dying, which isn't too great. Now if the children were born healthy and would survive, they'd be like illegal immigrants and need to avoid hospitals, schools, etc. Life would be so much harder and unhappier for all of those illegal kids, and there would be a lot of them because people are always gonna be stupid and have sex without contraception. Some who couldn't get the parenting license would even deliberately go against the law because they think it infringes on their basic human rights. TL, Dr. While a nice idea on the first glance, parenting licenses would cause a lot of problems and suffering. In my opinion, new parents should be given free guidance on parenting before the child is born and offered support if they feel overwhelmed. That's actually what they do in Finland, for example, and it seems to work pretty well. Also, free access to daycare helps parents who struggle. Parking a boat. One time, I was on a lake fishing, and this boat filled with 6-7 people were pulling an inflatable tube tied with a rope to the boat. There was a person on the tube, so just a normal summer activity. The thing is, there is a rule that so have to be so far away from other boats, and they were really close. It seemed like a lot of them were drunk. My dad put his hands up in the air and said, "What the hell?" But they couldn't hear us, and one of the people on there thought he was waving to them. That just pissed him off more. I know it'll never ever happen, and I get why, but bicyclists where I live. Riding your bike? Cool, great. But committing traffic violations when you're held to similar standards as regular vehicles, this is how it works where I live? Yeah, something needs to be done. I constantly see bicyclists nearly running over pedestrians when they run a red light, or fucking up traffic because they think they're above the traffic standards. And then they're the ones that get pissy when they cycle into moving traffic. Before you say anything, yes, we have bike lanes where I live, but a lot of people don't use them. I live in a very bike-friendly town, so there are many safe options for cyclists. A lot of them just don't take the time to use them. If you don't do this, then great, cool, but enough people where I live do it that I wish something was done about it. Meanwhile, the motorcyclists in my town are awesome. I'm a cyclist and I agree. I got my first road bike at age 15, and as the name implies, I rode it on the same roads where cars were going 40+ mph, which is legal and what you're supposed to do. However, I was terrified the first few months as I was trying to learn how to do it on my own. I worked my way up, from local streets with few cars and gradually to busier roads with regular traffic flow. Still, it was scary, and as an adult, I still find it to be dangerous. I wish I had a more experienced person to teach me at the time. Too many cyclists have no idea what they're doing, and I'm not happy when the ones who don't know the rules ruin the reputation of the sport for the ones who do. On the other hand, I also think drivers need to be taught how to ride correctly around cyclists. You need to treat them like any other slow-moving vehicle. Pretend you're driving behind a tractor or horse, and if you can't pass safely, slow down and wait until you can. The rules are the same. Drones. It is not currently required by law to obtain a Part 107 remote pilot's license to fly your drone if you are only flying it recreationally. However, recent changes to FAA rules and regulations do require recreational drone pilots to pass a knowledge and safety test called the Recreational UAS Safety Test. But that's not enough, and also almost noon is checking it. Every seller will sell you one. I'm professional licensed UAV pilot with over 500 flight hours. That's not that much TBH, and I have seen some shit. Those things can be dangerous. Everyone can fuck up. I did multiple times, but you should be prepared for the risk drones poses. It's frightening how many people comment, kids or parenting. I mean, I get why you're saying it because you have this impression of the world being full of idiots who are parents. Let me put this to you, you're part of the population of idiots who do or say something without a second thought of the repercussions. Think about who is going to make the rules and requirements for this parenting license. Most likely a rich, white man or men. Will they have your interests in mind or their own? What will the requirements be? What are you looking to solve with this solution? Should you only be allowed kids if you can afford it? So income-based. Should there be population limits by state or zip postcode? Maybe you need to move to a richer neighborhood with a lower head count per square km to have kids. Maybe an IQ test? You pass and your other half fails. What now? You're talking about putting yours and everyone else's choice to have children in the hands of the most powerful people who, believe it or not, rarely have your best interests at heart. But hey, if this Reddit post was a referendum, parenting licenses just became a thing, so well done. Score 1 for fascism and eugenics. Funny that you're thinking about idiot parents when you don't seem to know what others may actually think when they want some kind of license for people to have kids. People need licenses to drive cars, and there are plenty of morons still driving, but somehow they still have the base knowledge of what to do. A not so insignificant portion of parents don't. Having a kid means being responsible for the life of a human being. Is it that far-fetched to imagine that during pregnancy parents need to follow classes to learn how to care for an infant, that an exam sanctioned the end of the course, and if you fail, and depending on how badly you're failing, CPS will be checking on you more regularly till you pass? I used to work with social services, not in us, and let me tell you about this case. A couple is having their third kid. The first two have already been taken from them. Everyone knows them. They're unable to care for a child. But we still have to go through the same process during the normal routine DR appointment. The doctor flags CPS because the child seems malnourished. The investigation can now begin. Social worker plan a visit. Acknowledge the child is not being properly cared for. A report is made and sent to the judge to determine if the child should be removed from the family. All that process takes months. In the end, the child was removed early enough to save his life, but was still heavily malnourished, and that dance will start again when they'll have their fourth one. Hopefully, the process will never be too long and we won't have to ask the coroner to go fetch the child. But it had happened in other cases.